Two men, one throne. For years, they were the biggest martial arts stars in Hollywood. But behind the scenes, they were not just competing for bigger movies. They were publicly challenging each other, insulting one another in interviews, trying to humiliate each other in front of fellow actors, and they even came within moments of a real fight. This is how the war between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal became far worse than you remember. Steven Seagal made his film debut in 1988 with Above the Law, introducing himself as a former police officer and undercover agent who solved problems with Aikido techniques, breaking bones with a level of cold efficiency that no other action hero possessed at the time. Jean-Claude Van Damme, meanwhile, had already won the Mr. Belgium bodybuilding title, and that same year, he exploded onto the big screen with Bloodsport, showcasing something no one else in Hollywood could do. An almost superhuman level of flexibility, capable of performing a full split in midair during a fight. In many ways, the two men represented different versions of the same promise, the new face of action cinema. And like every promise in Hollywood, sooner or later, it was destined to collide with the other. The fuse was lit in the early 90s, when both men had already become two of the biggest stars in action cinema. Their movies competed for shelf space in video rental stores. Their names dominated movie posters, and the media could not stop comparing them. All it took was one question for the rivalry to rise to the surface. During interviews from that era, Steven Seagal was asked about Jean-Claude Van Damme's credentials as a martial artist. The interviewer reminded him that the Belgian actor claimed to have been a champion with Belgium's national karate team. Seagal smiled, paused for a moment, and delivered an answer that sounded more like an attack than an opinion. In a seemingly calm tone, he said that the claim about Van Damme being a champion somewhere was, at best, a matter of opinion. He then added, with unmistakable sarcasm, that he did not want to offend anyone, but that many people believed the story simply was not true.
Because, like, you guys go back to the martial arts world before you were movie stars, right? I mean, he was like a champion somewhere, and, right? I mean, you...
Well, I mean, I just promised all my mentors that I was going to be a good boy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a matter of opinion, that he was a champion anywhere. You know.
He was not criticizing one of Van Damme's movies. He was not talking about his acting. He was questioning the authenticity of Van Damme's competitive background, the very background that had helped establish him as a legitimate martial artist in Hollywood. And that detail mattered. Because at a time when action movies were filled with actors who could barely throw a convincing punch, Van Damme stood out precisely because he presented himself as a genuine competitor. If you could cast doubt on that background, you could also cast doubt on the very image that had turned him into a star. It was a perfectly calculated strike. The remarks quickly spread through magazines and entertainment shows. What had seemed like an ordinary interview soon became the first public attack between the two men. Van Damme, as expected, did not stay silent, and his response made one thing clear. This rivalry was no longer just a competition between two actors. From that moment on, it became deeply personal. Shortly after those television comments, the two men crossed paths at a Planet Hollywood event, the restaurant chain where several action stars were partners and frequent guests. According to Van Damme's own account years later, he decided to confront Seagal directly. He walked up to him and asked why he kept speaking badly about him on television when, personally, he had never done anything to him. According to the Belgian actor, Seagal replied with only a few words, avoided going any deeper into the subject, and after a brief exchange, the two men ended up shaking hands. From the outside, it looked as though the incident was over. But in reality, it had only been a temporary truce. The tension remained, and over the following years, it spilled into the press. In 1994, during an interview with Movie Line magazine, Van Damme began returning the punches publicly. Although he started by saying that Seagal was a good person, his tone quickly changed. He described him as someone who was far too tense and then delivered a much sharper criticism.
What about Steven Seagal?
Can you tell Steven Seagal?
Steven Seagal.
Okay, okay.
He said he had always found it amusing to watch a supposed tough guy fighting on screen while dressed in an elegant suit, something that, in his opinion, might impress audiences, especially women, but said very little about his actual physical condition. Without ever mentioning it outright, Van Damme was making it clear that he saw Seagal as a martial artist who had become increasingly less athletic and far removed from the image of invincibility he projected in his movies. The most intense moment of the entire rivalry took place in 1997 during a party at Sylvester Stallone's house in Miami. At first, the evening unfolded as usual: laughter, stories, and glasses raised in celebration. But before long, Seagal, true to his reputation, began talking not about his own accomplishments, but to belittle others. According to Stallone, his comments soon turned toward Van Damme, questioning his background, calling him overrated, and casting doubt on his legitimacy as a martial artist. Perhaps Seagal did not realize Van Damme was listening, or perhaps he simply did not care. But Van Damme heard every word, and this time he was not willing to stay silent. What happened next has become the stuff of legend. Van Damme confronted Seagal face to face. He did not throw a single punch. Instead, he challenged him to step outside and settle it like real martial artists. Stallone recalled that Seagal tried to brush the situation off with a nervous laugh, but Van Damme did not back down. He kept insisting, challenging him to back up his words with actions. Seagal declined and left the party. But the story did not end there. Later that same night, Van Damme found Seagal at a nearby nightclub where he had gone to escape the tension. In front of stunned witnesses, he challenged him to fight once again. And once again, Seagal refused. The incident quickly became legendary. Some claimed it had been staged, while others insisted it came within moments of turning violent. Stallone, however, confirmed years later that it was one of the most intense moments he had ever witnessed at a party. His words were clear. Van Damme was too strong. Seagal wanted no part of it. For Van Damme, it was never about putting on a show or feeding his ego. It was a matter of honor. When someone questions your discipline, your training, and your identity as a martial artist, you don't answer with speeches or empty words. You answer with actions. In his world, martial arts are not an act. They are a code. And in Van Damme's eyes, Seagal had betrayed that code by walking away from a direct fight for the second time. But the story does not end here. What happened next was even worse than you can imagine. The rivalry had gone so far that it caught the attention of people with the power to turn it into a real event. For years, the two men avoided any public confrontation, not in the ring, not on screen, not even through words. It was a rivalry fought in the shadows, built on avoided glances and uneasy silence. But in 2023, Van Damme broke that silence with a revelation that shook the action movie world. In an interview with The Telegraph, he dropped a bombshell. He had been offered $20 million to fight Seagal in a real match, with no script and no stunt doubles, in the heart of Las Vegas, at the iconic Mirage Casino. 2 black belts, 1 ring, and the chance to settle, once and for all, a rivalry that had consumed their careers. Van Damme told the story with an almost mocking sense of calm, as if he were recalling an absurd anecdote. Peter Guber offered $20 million to each of us to fight at the Mirage Casino in Las Vegas. It wasn't a movie fight, it was a real fight, in a ring, one-on-one, but Seagal didn't accept. The news landed like a punch to the gut for both the industry and the fans. It was not a rumor or a fantasy invented by fans. It was a genuine offer, backed by Peter Guber, one of Hollywood's biggest names, who saw the fight as the ultimate spectacle. The money was on the table, the venue was ready, and Van Damme was prepared to fight, but Seagal was ready to walk away for the 3rd time, and that is exactly what happened. Over the years, Van Damme never missed an opportunity to poke fun at his rival's physical condition. In another interview, he was even sharper, commenting that even during Seagal's overweight years, he still had that distinctive way of talking that was uniquely his, a remark that sounded like both a compliment and an insult at the same time. For a brief moment, it seemed the rivalry might turn into the same kind of commercial truce that Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone had found years earlier through Planet Hollywood. Producer Moshe Diamant tried to bring both stars together in a movie titled Weapon, in which they would play two rival assassins who, without realizing it, end up going after each other while working for the same organization. On paper, it was a brilliant idea. Take two of the biggest names in martial arts cinema and turn years of rumors and tension into millions of dollars at the box office. However, the negotiations never moved forward. Between creative differences, scheduling conflicts, and, according to several people involved, the difficult relationship between the two actors, the project disappeared before it ever entered production. As a result, Weapon became part of the long list of Hollywood movies that were announced but never actually made. Meanwhile, the two men's careers began heading in very different directions. Van Damme was still enjoying some of the best years of his career. After the success of Universal Soldier, he achieved one of his biggest commercial hits with Time Cop, the highest-grossing film of his entire career, cementing his status as one of the biggest action stars of the 90s. Although he would soon begin making decisions that hurt his career, including the disappointing reception of his directorial debut, The Quest. Along with his well-known personal struggles, he remained a major name in Hollywood. For Steven Seagal, the story was almost the exact opposite. After the enormous success of Under Siege, he seemed destined to compete head-to-head with the biggest stars of the genre. But in 1994, he chose to star in and direct On Deadly Ground, an ambitious film with a strong environmental message that became one of the biggest disappointments of his career. The movie was heavily criticized, particularly for its lengthy closing speech, and grossed far less than expected. From that point on, his reputation in Hollywood began to decline rapidly. The following years only accelerated that downfall. Although he continued releasing a few theatrical films, most received very negative reviews and performed worse and worse at the box office. Gradually, the major studios stopped investing in him, and Seagal ended up working almost exclusively in the direct-to-video market, where he would go on to star in dozens of low-budget productions. Over time, he even became the subject of jokes among fans because of the number of action scenes filmed with stunt doubles, or simply because he was fighting while sitting in a chair, an image that was very different from that of the relentless martial artist who had conquered Hollywood just a few years earlier. For decades, the rivalry seemed frozen in time, kept alive more by occasional interview comments than by any active conflict. But at the beginning of 2025, something changed unexpectedly. A photo of the two men together, smiling during what appeared to be a completely friendly meeting, began circulating online. Van Damme later posted a video celebrating Seagal's 73rd birthday, thanking him and his family for what he described as a fantastic dinner, while also hinting that the two of them might even be working on something together after more than 3 decades of disagreements. When asked directly about the state of his relationship with Seagal, Van Damme gave a straightforward answer. He said he had no problem with him, and that those kinds of rivalries were, in the end, just something that happens when you're young. Now let me ask you a question. Who do you think would have won a real fight in Stallone's backyard between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal? Van Damme, with his speed, explosiveness, and full contact fighting experience? Or Seagal, with his Aikido, his size, and his confidence in his techniques? Leave your answer and, more importantly, your reasoning in the comments. I can't wait to read what you think. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, there's another one waiting for you right here.